From iron cometh strength. From strength cometh will. From will cometh faith. From faith cometh honor. From honor cometh iron. This is the unbreakable litany. May it forever be so. Welcome back, Seekers. Once again, you may call me the Curator, and today we will be covering one of the most pragmatic legions, whose tenacity and will made them one of the premier forces to be reckoned with during the days of the Horus Heresy. Today we discuss the 4th Legion, the Iron Warriors. The Iron Warriors are the 4th Legion of the Emperor's original 20 legions of Space Marines. Originally called the Iron Lords, the 4th Legion's early years before the Great Crusade were defined by its very adaptable gene seed, leading to more surviving aspirants, and its low rate of bionic rejection. Together, these characteristics made them premier siege and shock troops, able to bring wounded men back to the field faster and replace losses quicker than other legions. It also allowed the Legion to deploy much faster than the others, seeing combat deployments alongside the 1st and 5th Legions before the others could leave the gene labs of the palace. Despite the promising beginnings, the 4th Legion would become one of the key factions in the traitor forces, deserving much of the credit for bringing the arch-traitors' fleets to Terra in force. The Iron Warriors became known for grinding their foes into dust with heavy artillery and then armored spearheads to crush whatever remained. While this tactic worked well for the Iron Warriors during the unification of Sol, it was not suited for the demands of the Great Crusade. Despite this, the Legion was frequently used as a workhorse by Horus, sent to backwater campaigns where their specialty of grinding down the foe would inevitably win them the day. The Legion would never change its tactics from its time on Sol, even when to do so would have saved them from disaster. This reality would become too large to ignore at the siege of the Forge World Incaldion. A Forge World created before the days of the Imperium, it was made using a colony ship utilizing cryosleep. Before its discovery, its priesthood were harassed by all forms of foul Xenos. This harassment causes local priesthood to adopt a very aggressive stance towards outsiders, as the tides of the war pestered them by dropping threat after threat upon their doorstep. When the Iron Warriors were tasked with bringing this belligerent Forge World into compliance with the doctrines of Mars and the Olympus Mons, they were met by a foe more than prepared for them. Employing their usual stratagems of intense artillery bombardments followed by armored spearheads, they would find themselves walking headfirst into their own demise. While the Iron Warriors would eventually manage to pacify the priesthood and unite them at last with Terra, it would be at the cost of 29,000 Marines from their ranks. I feel that number needs some perspective, as the concept of 29,000 Marines is a difficult one to grasp. In the Damocles Gulf Crusade, the first conflict of the Imperium and the Tau in the 41st millennium, a mere 500 Marines took part. The loss of 29,000 Marines is a severe blow even to the legions of the Crusade. It would only compound matters that this would be their final notable compliance before the discovery of their Primarch. Discussing this Primarch comes with great difficulty, as it's hard to discuss some of his actions without making him come off as a tyrant even at the best of times. Yet despite his abrasive exterior, Perturabo was one of the few Primarchs that could be called extremely competent. Perturabo was discovered on a feudal world named Olympia by its people. A mountainous and craggy world, its people concentrated themselves into city-states, similar to the Bronze Ages of the Boeta province on Terra, or the Peloponnesian Peninsula, as it was known before the days of Old Night. Its leaders would use checkpoints to control the roads that snaked across its mountains, and high walls to deter would-be invaders. Perturabo would find himself the adopted son of one of the rulers of these city-states, called the Tyrant of Lokos, or Demikos. Despite a year of being essentially a mountain man, Demikos was impressed by the young Primarch's intellect and frequently used his abilities as a wonder in diplomacy to secure himself favorable deals and alliances. While Damikos would be winning no awards for Adoptive Progenitor of the Year, he certainly seemed to hold some affection for his adoptive son, an affection that Perturabo would not return. Olympia itself and its people left a lasting effect on Perturabo. Its politics were riddled with assassination attempts and the constant paranoia of his ruling classes, both of which influenced Perturabo as he was unwillingly forced to partake in these political games. Even of his adoptive siblings, the only one Perturabo truly showed any kindness to was his sister Caliphany. Yet, another influence on his psyche was a particular mental quirk. His dreams were haunted with visions of the Eye of Terror and the iridescent maelstrom within. When diplomacy broke down, or when Damikos felt the need for more land, Perturabo would be the one to lead his armies, something Perturabo would find expertise in. The nature of the city-states of Olympia offered Perturabo plenty of experience as a siege expert, breaking down once impregnable walls with siege engines previously thought impossible by the people of Olympia. When he was rediscovered by the Emperor, he immediately ousted his adoptive father and submitted himself to the Emperor, eager to find a purpose from the man who created him. The reunification with the Primarch would set the scene for the rest of the Legion's history up until the Heresy. Upon a review of the Legion's records, their victories, their doctrines, their traditions, and their effectiveness, Perturabo was left unimpressed. The Legion's punishment for failing to live up to Perturabo's expectations would be decimation. For those not familiar with decimation as a concept, it is a form of collective punishment in which legionnaires are grouped into groups of 10, which they would all draw lots. The member that draws the shortest lot of the 10 would be beaten until death by the other 9. A whole 10% of the Legion would perish by their own hands, enacted as the first order Perturabo would give his sons, before he would take them to settle a different grudge, the Black Judges. The Black Judges were a group of a couple hundred human warlords, using technology from the Dark Age in order to extend their lives exponentially, using the genetic material of others. From their base on the Moon of Judgment, they would use their fleets to raid the inhabited worlds of the Mera Terra cluster, the same cluster as Olympia. Those they didn't raid, they would bargain with, offering protection against Xenos threats. Worlds would willingly give the Black Judges thousands of their population, who would be processed to feed the Judges' immortality. Perturabo and the new Iron Warriors struck at the heart like a hammer, wasting no time turning their slaving fleet into slag, and crumbling the Judges' citadels within the Moon of Judgment upon their heads. A group of warlords who terrorized that region of space for thousands of years was obliterated from all but memory by the Iron Warriors in mere days. As a trophy of their victory, the Iron Warriors towed the entire Moon of Judgment back to Olympia, where it would serve as the shipyard for the 4th Legion's fleet. The Legion's fall would come from a death by 1,000 cuts. Their conquest after the reunification of the Primarch were inglorious campaigns. Frequently, they would be handed the same conquest as before, being given inglorious work that, while crucial to the overall crusade, held very little glory for the Legion. Yet they would not suffer another Incaldion, in part thanks to Perturabo. While the Legion already boiled war down to cold logic and math before the return of the Primarch, the Lord of Iron made it their bread and butter. The entire battle space would be relegated to a series of complex equations. As a member of the Legion, your only recourse for surviving the mathematics of war was to hope you would not be the one sacrificed for others' victories. The culmination for this disregard for the Iron Warriors came in the Samtrada Deeps campaign. The War Council, a group of high-ranking military members of the Imperium responsible for guiding the Great Crusade at the macro scale, sent Perturabo and the Iron Warriors to the Vulpa Straits to purge a Xenos migration in the area. The Straits was a star cluster that held almost no strategic value to the Imperium at large, yet Perturabo was sent anyway. The Xenos, named the Hrud by later Imperial authorities, would prove to be one of the Imperium's most dangerous threats. They, through biological and technological means, were able to manipulate the very flow of time. Marines once thought to be immune to the sands of time now wasted away into dust simply for being in the presence of the Hrud. This campaign took such a toll that even their Primarch began to have signs of age as the lines of his face deepened into crow's feet. One of the Legion's notable Warsmiths, Barabas Danticoh, aged a chronological estimate of 3,000 years before the Hrud were finally driven off. Bitter about the pointlessness of this campaign, and the grievous casualties taken to achieve it, morale within the Fourth was so low it was a tripping hazard when they received the dire news that Olympia itself had risen in rebellion against the Imperium. Enraged at the news of his homeworld's betrayal, Perturabo pulled the Legion from the incomplete extermination of the Hrud, assembling it together as one before falling upon Olympia's skies. There would be no half measures, no mercy given, and no lines left uncrossed. As the Iron Warriors began their preparations to tear down the stone walls of Olympia's cities, Perturabo issued to them an ultimatum. They must either enact decimation, or every living soul within their walls would be put to the torch, or live the rest of their lives as slaves. Whole cities were burned to nothing but melted stone, and millions would lay dead before the 4th Legion ended their assault on Perturabo's homeworld. Their actions would be so beyond the pale that even someone within their own ranks would refuse to partake in the slaughter. But their protests fell on deaf ears, as they too were cut down by their fellow brothers, deemed too weak to do what was necessary. In the midst of burning their cities to the ground, Perturabo would have but one person he would visit before the grim deed was complete. Lumbering through familiar roads, his figure shadowing an all-too-familiar door. While Locos burned around him, he entered the palace to speak with Caliphany for a final time. Caliphany, once Perturabo's younger sister, now stood before him an old woman, still alive and standing thanks to an imperial life support system. Despite the world around her burning to its foundations, Caliphany took the chance to tell Perturabo what it is that he needed to hear the most. The fate of Perturabo was not by the misdeeds of the Emperor, putting a son as he sees as useless to tasks below himself. No paraphrasing I could give could do her words their proper recourse, so instead I shall read to you a section of her words. The Emperor of all mankind came here and found a son whom he valued. He saw an indomitable will with an unshakable determination. He recognized that you would not give up, that you would rise to best any difficulty, that the tedious to you is as necessary a challenge to overcome as the glorious, and neither are to be shirked. Seeing these qualities in you, your father set you to difficult tasks, not because he saw no value in you, but the exact opposite. He can trust no one else to get them done. For a long time, I thought you a fool to follow the Emperor. After all, he is a tyrant like all the rest. Look what he has done to you, I thought. He has brutalized you, and your wars have brutalized your home. But the truth is, brother, I have followed your campaigns carefully, and I have noticed a pattern that disturbed and then alarmed me. Always, you do things the most difficult way, and in the most painful manner. You cultivate a martyr's complex, lurching from man to man, holding out your bleeding wrists so that they might see how you hurt yourself. You brood in the shadows when all you want to do is scream, "Look at me!" You are too arrogant to win people over through effort. And you expect people to notice you there, in the half-darkness, and point and shout, there is the great Perturabo. See how he labors without complaint." You came to this court as a precocious child, your abilities so prodigious that nobody stopped to look at what you were becoming. Both the Legion and the Imperium were aghast at their actions when the smoke had cleared. But before the rest of the Imperium could pull themselves to react to Olympia's slaughter, the 4th Legion were once again redeployed. This time, they would be sent to the Isstvan system. Their previous actions drowned out by the ongoing civil war, the Iron Warriors were believed to be loyal coming into the Isstvan sector. Hiding under the guise of comrades, the Iron Warriors, along with the rest of their traitors' cousins, allowed the Raven Guard, the Salamanders, and the Iron Hands legions to lead the charge against the initial traitor force. Yet, when they expected reinforcements from the Iron Warriors, all they received was bolter fire in the back. The Iron Warriors consummated their betrayal with a callous disregard to their fellow comrades, shooting down aircraft into their own allies' lines and coldly bombarding friendly and enemy alike with their artillery. When the word bearers, annoyed by the callous disregard, contacted the Iron Warriors asking them to show restraint, the only response they received was, "Have faith, word bearer," and a muffled chuckling. With 3 legions shattered into the fires of an ambush, the traitors began the march to Terra. Every step forward was met with 2 steps back, as brothers whom joined Horus in rebellion became increasingly consumed by the powers of chaos. First, Fulgrim would deceive Perturabo into chasing a weapon that never existed, only to attempt to use his soul as a catalyst for his own transformation. Then, instead of being able to enact his war against Dorn's forces, he was relegated to the rear guard to stall the encroaching Ultramarines that the Word Bearers and the World Eaters had failed to cripple. Even that would become a temporary posting, as Perturabo was tasked now with finding Angron, whom had ignored their plans to rampage across unimportant worlds to the war effort. It was only after Perturabo and the Iron Warriors wrangled yet another one of their cousins back into rank that the Siege of Terra was poised to begin. What Perturabo found waiting for him at the siege was a defense handcrafted against his tactics, while forcing him to play into them. The defenses of Terra forced the traitors into grinding front lines, where they had to force their way, planet by planet, to Terra while bleeding precious time. While he originally was assigned once more to the rearguard, with hopes their expertise could buy the traitors yet more time to crack Terra's defenses, Perturabo demanded the role of field commander, to prosecute his vengeance against Dorn. Despite a few noteworthy gains, such as the Lion's Gate spaceport, Perturabo had become disillusioned to the state of his comrades. They wished to crush their rival legion in a duel of skill and will, yet 4 of his brothers were now warp-tainted abominations, and demons infested every level of their command. Whatever victory they had joined Horus for had become too tainted to enjoy. As Horus named Mortarion field commander after the blunder at Saturnine Gate, Perturabo and the Iron Warriors quit the siege, as there was no longer anything to gain by grinding themselves away. With the victory over Dorn sullied at the siege, Perturabo put the efforts of the Iron Warriors into a new task. At Sebastus IV, they would begin construction of a new fortress, one that would lure the Imperial fists within so that Perturabo could crush his rivals once more. When Dorn arrived, without a plan nor with any preparation, Perturabo's trap was sprung. Bit by bit, he would peel away the Legion's numbers, separating them piecemeal before eradicating the encircled companies. Even when some Imperial fists managed to breach the fortress, they found the interior to be nothing but an open field with defenses pointing inward. For 3 weeks, the legions mauled each other, with the Imperial fists relegated to using the bodies of their dead as sandbags. Yet, Perturabo could not finish the job, as the arrival of the Ultramarines removed any chance for him to take his final prize. Yet, with the sacrifice of the Marines whom died there, he was able to ascend to demonhood before retreating into the warp with his legion. Within the warp, Perturabo found a world within the tides which he named Medringard, before naming it the Legion's new home. What was once a barren and rocky landscape has become choked with factories and smog, pumping out war gear to sate the hungers of Perturabo's campaigns. While the Iron Warriors themselves have remained a part of the war against the Imperium, Perturabo has never left the fortress on Medrengard until recently, losing a skirmish against his brother Mortarion in the War of Rust. The first of the Legion's notable members, Barabas Danticoh, is perhaps an exemplar of his Legion's best and worst attributes, both of which Danticoh wields to a dreadful efficiency. An outcast after speaking against Perturabo's commitment to the Hrud, he had since been ordered to capture and hold a backwater world, and to build a supply fortress for the Imperium to use. At the onset of the heresy, another commander of the Iron Warriors came to the fortress, demanding Danticoh surrender it for Horus's armies and to join in the rebellion against the Emperor. Danticoh took this personally. Refusing his legion, Danticoh led what meager forces he had against the entire 14th Great Company and the 51st Expeditionary Fleet for over a year. When the traitors landed an Imperator-class Titan corrupted by the Plague God to breach their walls, Danticoh still had one more card left in his deck. When its guns turned their walls to slag and the Titan came to claim its victory, Danticoh teleported his remaining troops aboard the flagship of the traitors, while the fortress exploded under their feet. All the war gear stored there, the fortress itself, the traitor commander, and the Emperor-class Titan, fell into a now burning lake of Promethium, leaving nothing for the traitors to claim victory over. With a bit of deception, Danticoh and his loyalists managed to take control of the flagship of the traitors, sharding it for Terra. He would later be detoured into the realm of Archamar at Sothis, where he would find himself able to use a strange Xenos machine that allowed him to send messages and matter across vast distances without interference by the warp. This technology would end up the linchpin for Guilliman's defense, until Danticoh sacrificed himself to destroy the machine instead of letting it fall into enemy hands. Golg is one of the members of the Trident at the opening days of the Horus Heresy. Erasmus Golg was the epitome of his Gene Father's expectations. Failure under his command would be met with death, and his strategies would prefer brutal, unrelenting efficiency to casualty reduction. Golg would perish aboard his flagship, the Contrador, at the Battle of Fall. When the ambush was turned on the Iron Warriors, in the last hours of the battle, his ship was identified as one of the primary commanders for the fleet, and with a successful boarding action, he would be slain on the bridge before the Imperial Fists added the Contrador to their own fleet. Kroeger found himself as one of the members of the Trident following the failures of another Marine called Harkor at the Battle of Hydra Cordatus. He was known as remarkably blunt, tending to take very direct and overt options compared to the two other Warsmiths. It would be Kroeger who would be the mastermind behind the fall of Lionsgate Spaceport, using an infiltration team to cut the defenses from the docking section and to allow the Iron Blood to dock and disembark its troops to overwhelm the Imperial Fist stationed there. Barban Falk would be the successor to Erasmus Golg on the Trident. Falk was an imposing figure, even for an Astartes. He was abnormally tall and with the strength to match his size. With two of the Trident members either dead or disgraced in the opening days of the Horus Heresy, he benefited greatly from the 4th Legion's harsh punishments for failure. During an exploration of an Eldari crone world alongside the Emperor's children, whom would later betray them on that same planet, Barban Falk would change. As the Wraith Guard defending the world assaulted the carefully planned lines of the 4th Legion, one of the Neverborn would whisper into his ear, which allowed Falk to use its power to command his forces. Yet this deal would seemingly change something within him, as after escaping the Crone world after the betrayal of the Emperor's children, he would no longer answer to the name Barban Falk. Instead, he would insist on simply being called the Warsmith. By the time of the Siege of Terra, Falk's attention seemed to no longer be on obtaining revenge on the Imperium that had wronged them, but in the powers of the warp itself. Welcome to the end of the lessons, Seekers. I greet you here not as your curator, but as the creator. This section will be primarily my own thoughts and feelings on the 4th Legion, including a healthy serving of salt. If you are here only to learn, then I implore you to like this video and subscribe, so that I know you all want more before you go. If you want to listen to me ramble on my personal thoughts on the 4th Legion, then welcome. Now then, if Perturabo has 1,000,000 haters, then I am one of them. If he has 10 haters, then I am one of them. If Perturabo has only 1 hater, then that is me. If Perturabo has no haters, then that means I am no longer on Earth. If the world loves Perturabo, then I am against the world. The Legion has a lot going for it, as that industrial brutalist aesthetic has some serious appeal. I mean, hell, they have a literal siege train. Can you imagine going toe-to-toe against Astartes, only for them to whip out a goddamn siege train like it's a Battlefield 1 lobby? Yet Perturabo is like a massive anchor that's just dragging it down. I can understand why some people enjoy them, really I can. Even outside of that aesthetic, I think many of us can relate to being the workhorse for your employer, while some of your colleagues receive all of the credit. But Perturabo, in every scene that I've had the displeasure of reading him in, has come off as just this massive asshole. I think Calliphanes' speech nails him to the wall pretty well as a petulant man-child, but he also reminds me as the kid who was always praised as being gifted through high school and middle school. The person who was told how special they are and are placed in all the gifted courses and never needs to study to pass his classes, only to reach university and find out he is remarkably average. While someone could do some introspection and realize that they need to work and continue to stand out against their peers, Perturabo is the type of person to instead complain that he isn't being showered with attention and praised for such little effort anymore. What's even worse to me is that I feel he becomes the very thing he complains the Emperor was to him. Consistently, we see him have other characters like his sons take creative risks to solve a problem, and at the moment of their victory, he will arrive just to be the one to claim it was all his idea. All in all, while I can understand the enjoyment of the Iron Warriors, Perturabo is a little bit of bad that spoils the whole lot for me. And with that, I bid all of you seekers adieu, and hope to see you again at the next lesson. If you have any suggestions for topics or questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you would like to suggest a faction, please leave your reasoning as well, as I would love to hear the reasoning you chose your own. Until next time, Seekers.